He thought she was just a maid. He didn't know she owned the land under his mansion, the secrets in his safe, and the loyalty of people he could never buy. By the time he realized, it was already too late. Don't forget to subscribe for more mind-blowing true-style stories you won't believe are real. He had always looked at her as though she were less than human, the kind of entitled arrogance that comes from never having heard the word no in your life. And that Thursday afternoon in the gilded marble kitchen of the Carrington estate, 21-year-old Blake Carrington, son of oil tycoon Gregory Carrington and heiress Melinda, smirked while leaning against the 12-foot granite island as he tossed a half-eaten croissant onto the floor and said, "Pick it up, Clara, and crawl for it," his tone dripping with the sick pleasure of someone who believed their money made them king of the earth. And Clara Johnson, a 47-year-old black woman who had worked in that house for 6 years, stood frozen for a moment, her hands tightening around the silver tray she was carrying, her knuckles whitening, because she knew every camera in that kitchen was live streaming to the estate's security hub. She knew he wanted to humiliate her, break her, remind her that in his eyes she wasn't a person but a servant whose dignity could be purchased for the $500 a week paycheck they gave her without a second thought. And she also knew something else. Something Blake could never have imagined. That while she wore the crisp white uniform and kept her hair tied neatly under a scarf, she was not just the maid. She was the silent owner of the 11-acre land under this $330 million compound thanks to an inheritance from her late father. Land she had leased to the Carrington family under terms so cleverly buried in old legal language that not even Gregory had bothered to read them. And that lease, signed decades ago, was now less than 48 hours from expiring, with a renewal clause that gave her full rights to reclaim the property without paying them a cent. And so as Blake laughed and the other kitchen staff looked down in shame, Clara calmly set the tray down, got on her hands and knees, and crawled, slowly, deliberately, toward the croissant, not because she was defeated, but because she understood the sweet taste of patience and timing. And as she reached it, she looked up at him and said, "You enjoy this moment, Blake, it's the last you'll ever have in this kitchen." And his laugh turned mocking again as he called her pathetic, not realizing those words would echo back to him in less than a day when his world collapsed, because that night Clara drove to her modest apartment in the west side of the city, unlocked a weathered cedar box under her bed, and pulled out a stack of documents, original deeds, signed leases, notarized letters, that spelled the quiet truth that had been her ace for years. And she made a few phone calls, not to lawyers because lawyers could be bought by people like the Carringtons, but to a journalist she trusted from her church who worked for the state's largest investigative newspaper, a title company her father had done business with for 40 years, and the city zoning board, whose director happened to owe her a favor after she once paid for his mother's emergency surgery when he couldn't. And while Blake was out partying that night at a rooftop bar, she set in motion a chain of events that could not be stopped. The title company prepared to transfer the property. The zoning board confirmed they would revoke all permits for the Carrington estate the moment she claimed the land, and the journalist began drafting an exposé detailing decades of tax manipulation, wage theft, and hush money settlements tied to the Carringtons, evidence Clara had quietly collected over the years by simply paying attention, copying documents left carelessly on desks, and listening when people thought she was invisible. And at 7:12 a.m. the next morning, while Blake was still hungover, the Carringtons woke to pounding on their ornate mahogany front door as sheriffs served them with eviction notices, a court injunction freezing their assets tied to the property, and a certified letter from Clara herself that read simply, effective immediately, "You are trespassing on my land." And the chaos that followed was a symphony of poetic justice. Gregory yelling into phones trying to reach lawyers who suddenly wouldn't answer because their firms had been named in the journalist's breaking story. Melinda pacing in silk pajamas screaming about reputational damage as news helicopters circled overhead. Blake storming into the kitchen only to find Clara there one last time, not in uniform but in a tailored navy blazer, handing final instructions to a moving crew. Her moving crew, telling them which antiques and fixtures were to be removed because they had been purchased with funds from a business operating on her property without proper license. And when Blake, red-faced and shaking, shouted, "You can't do this to us," she stepped close enough for him to see the calm fire in her eyes and whispered, "I already did," before walking out the front doors as cameras from every news outlet in the state swarmed the gates. And by noon the stock price of Carrington Energy had plummeted 47% as investors fled from the scandal. By evening their board had voted Gregory out as CEO, and by midnight all major banks had frozen their accounts pending fraud investigations, and Clara, once the maid they thought could be made to crawl, sat in her father's old rocking chair on the porch of her now empty estate, sipping sweet tea and watching the lights of the Carringtons' convoy disappear down the long driveway for the last time, knowing that empires don't fall because of earthquakes, they fall because of the people they step on without thinking, and she smiled, not out of cruelty, but because she had proven a truth that would outlive them all. You can't buy dignity, and you can't own a soul that refuses to bow.